Over the past week or so, including today, we've discussed issues relating to abortion a few times, and that's where the news cycle has taken us, though even apart from the news cycle, it is one of the central issues of our time and has, for that reason, always been a central concern of mine. Now, the focus on this topic recently has provoked many people to leave all kinds of comments and send me messages making all sorts of really bad arguments against my position. And I addressed some of those arguments as presented by people on TikTok, I think that was last week. But there's one argument that I've not addressed recently, and it's perhaps worth devoting some attention to because many people seem to find it persuasive. At least 4 different people over the last week have brought this up to me. And the argument varies a little bit depending on who is making it, but the theme and the point is always the same. So I'll pull one of these at random in order to respond to it. Here is the argument as articulated by someone in the comments on my show. I think this was yesterday. And he wrote, quote, "Okay, thought experiment. There's a burning abortion clinic, and due to the very unusual circumstances you find yourself in, you only have time to choose between saving a perfectly healthy baby who's a few weeks old, or you could save a mini fridge containing 1,000 implanted eggs at the very earliest stages. Would you actually lose sleep over saving the child instead of these 1,000, quote, children?" Now, as I said, this is a popular argument. You've probably heard it before. Sometimes it's 1,000 embryos, sometimes it's 10,000, sometimes 500, sometimes there's a baby or a 5-year-old or a kid of some other age. In this case, the commenter says 1,000 implanted eggs in an abortion clinic for some reason. We'll assume he meant embryos in an IVF clinic, because implantation is when the egg attaches to the uterine wall. If there's 1,000 of those, then there are 1,000 pregnant women. And my question is, why are they in a freezer? And also, if I have time to save 1,000 pregnant women, why can't I save the baby too? But this is semantics, perhaps. We'll just say embryos, because that's the form the argument usually takes. And the point here is obvious. If you say that the born child, if you say that you would save the born child over the embryos, then clearly you must be affirming that there is some sort of inherent difference between the born child and the embryo, which reveals supposedly a fundamental contradiction in your pro-life position. That is, unless you take more than 10 seconds to think about the issue. Which I have, so here's how I would break it down. Would I save the born baby instead of the embryos? Yes, absolutely. No question. Does that prove that my position on abortion is wrong or contradictory or logically weak? No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. A few things to consider. First, we're talking about emotions here, okay? The decision of who to save in a burning building is an emotional one that you make, more than it is a moral one. The reason we're put in a burning building for this hypothetical is to get us to forfeit our moral reasoning and adopt emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning in a burning building is okay. In an abortion clinic, it isn't. After all, my personal and emotional connection with my own child would lead me to save him over someone else's. Does that mean I don't recognize the value of someone else's child, or that it would be okay for me to kill someone else's child? Of course not. Second point, there's a really important difference between leaving someone in a burning building because you can't save them and directly killing them yourself. It is morally permissible to commit a good act, saving a child, which may indirectly lead to something bad, the embryos being destroyed. The intention in that case is to save the child, not to destroy the embryos. I'm not the one who's destroying the embryos. I didn't kill them. I merely failed to prevent them from being killed. And that's obviously a really significant distinction. It's why if there are two people trapped in a fire and you run in and save only one, you're not going to be prosecuted for murdering the one you didn't save. If anyone's prosecuted for murder, it'll be the person who set the fire. See, in abortion, on the other hand, the child is being killed in a, quote, fire set by his parents. A choice is made to directly and purposefully kill the child. It's a very different thing. Third, this thought experiment, if it measures anything at all, it measures how much I personally would value the child over the embryos. But it doesn't matter how I value them personally. It's their intrinsic value that matters. I value my family over your family, whoever you are. I value my family over yours. But your family has the same intrinsic value. See, I'm making the decision based, as I said before, on emotion. I can see the child. I can hear him crying. I'm looking him in the eyes. I grab him. It's instinct. There's also some logic to it. I don't really know how many of the embryos are still, viable, whether they'll ever be implanted and given the chance to develop. I don't know these things. Again, this calculation would not justify killing the embryos under any circumstance, but it would justify my decision to save the child instead. Maybe I can get the point across with my own thought experiment, okay? You're in a burning building. There's an 85-year-old terminally ill cancer patient and a healthy 5-year-old boy. You could only save one. Who do you choose? Wouldn't everyone save the 5-year-old? Even the 85-year-old himself would probably tell you to save the 5-year-old. Is that because the 85-year-old's life has less value? Does the fact that we would all immediately choose the 5-year-old prove anything at all about the intrinsic value of elderly people? No, it speaks only to the terrible and morbid calculations we're forced to make when we're put in a dire situation like this. If I had a choice to save my own child or 100 strangers, well, I've got bad news for the strangers. And the news is not that they have no moral worth or basic rights. It's just that I'm dad and that's my kid, and I'm not leaving him to burn under any circumstance. So that's how you deal with that argument. But notice something about the pro-abortion side. Notice how they almost always rely on these far-fetched hypotheticals. You're in a burning IVF clinic. You're attached by tubes to a stranger, et cetera, et cetera. Or they rely on extremely hard cases like rape and incest. See, what the pro-abortion side never wants to talk about is the actual reality of abortion in almost every case. Because in actual reality, almost every time, there's no fire. There hasn't been any rape. There's just the child who was conceived through an intentional act by the parents. And he's there now. And so is the mother. And so is the abortionist. And a choice is made that doesn't have to be made. That's the reality. So let's talk about that. But that's the last thing that anybody on the pro-abortion side actually wants to talk about, which is why they are today, yet again, of course, canceled. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.